Hello friends, today we are going to discuss all the theorems on circles. But before that, let's talk about some of very basic about circle and line. Let's start with chord, is a line joining any 2 points on the circle. A diameter is a chord that passes through the center of the circle. In fact, it is the longest chord of circle. A secant is a line that cuts the circle at 2 points, and continues beyond it. A tangent is a line that touches the circle at exactly 1 point. Let's join any 2 points on circle that will give us a chord which divides the circle in 2 segments by size. One would be major segment and other we call minor segment. Let's dive into these theorems one by one. Theorem 1. Angles in the same segment. Let's take a circle with chord. Now, from that chord, let's draw some angles on the same side of the chord, both touching the circle's edge. Here's the magic. Those angles are always equal. Why? Because they're in the same segment of the circle, the part of the circle that's cut off by the chord. So even if you move one of the angles around, as long as it stays on the same arc and in the same segment, the size of the angle doesn't change. Now let's talk about very important point with regards to angle in a segment. Angle made in the major segment is always acute, whereas angle made in minor sector is always obtuse. Let's look at the next theorem on circle. Imagine you have a circle, and you draw a straight line across it that goes through the center. That's called the diameter. Now, pick any point on the edge of the circle and connect it to both ends of the diameter to make a triangle. Here's the amazing part. The angle formed at the point on the circle will always be exactly 90 degrees. That means it's a perfect right angle. No matter where you place that point on the edge, as long as it's opposite the diameter, the angle will still be a right angle. Let's explore another neat circle fact. Imagine you draw a chord. Now, from the center of the circle, you draw a line that goes straight to the midpoint of that chord, right in the middle. Here's what happens. That line from the center will cut the chord exactly in half and will also meet it at a perfect 90-degree angle. That means it's perpendicular to the chord. Okay class, we're going to understand a very interesting theorem related to circles. It's called the alternate segment theorem. So, what does this theorem say? It says, the angle between the tangent and chord at the point of contact is equal to the angle in the alternate segment. Wait, what does that mean? Let's break it down with the help of a diagram. Imagine a circle. We draw a chord, and a tangent which touches the circle at one end of the chord. Now from other end of the chord draw a triangle by connecting it point of contact where the tangent touching the circle. Now here is the key part. According to the alternate segment theorem, the angle between the tangent and the chord is equal to the angle in the opposite segment of the circle. That is, the angle made by chord in the other side of the circle. Now, we're diving into a super interesting shape, called the cyclic quadrilateral. Sounds complicated? Don't worry, I'll make it really simple. Look at this circle. Now, place 4 points on this circle, and connect them one by one. What do you get? A 4-sided shape, called a quadrilateral. But wait, since all 4 corners, or vertices, lie on the circle, this special quadrilateral is called a cyclic quadrilateral. But why is it called cyclic? Because it can be inscribed in a circle. That means the whole quadrilateral fits perfectly inside a circle, with all corners touching the circle. Now here comes the very important property. In any cyclic quadrilateral, the sum of the opposite angles is always 180 degrees. That means if one angle is 110 degrees, the angle opposite to it must be 70 degrees. Now let's move to next theorem, tangents from a point. Imagine you're standing outside a circle at point P and you draw 2 tangents, PA and PB. That touch the circle at points A and B. Now comes the magical part. The length of PA is exactly equal to the length of PB. Tangents drawn from an external point to a circle are always equal in length. Why is that true? Well, if we draw lines from the center of the circle C to points A and B, and line joining center C to point P, we create 2 triangles, CPA and CPB. These 2 triangles are same radius, CA equals CB, same length from point to center, and both have right angles at the tangents, because a radius is always perpendicular to the tangent. So, by RHS congruence rule, the 2 triangles are congruent, and that means PA equals PB. This property is super useful in solving geometry problems and even in construction. Now let's dive into super fascinating and quite magical theorem. It's called the intersecting chords theorem, also known as the chord power theorem. So, what does the theorem say? It says, if 2 chords intersect inside or outside a circle, then the product of the segments of one chord is equal to the product of the segments of the other chord. Let's understand that with a simple diagram. Imagine a circle, draw two chords, say AB and CD, that intersect at a point P, inside or outside the circle. Now this point P divides chord AB into two parts, PA and PB. It also divides chord CD into PC and PD. Here comes the magic. The intersecting chords theorem tells us PA times PB equals PC times PD. Yes, the product of the lengths of the two segments of one chord is equal to the product of the segments of the other chord. Now let's add an additional point to theorem 6. If the point is outside, then product of the segment PA into PB is equal to PC into PD is equal square of length of tangent from point P to circle, which is PT square. Now, we're diving into one of the most elegant theorems in circle geometry. The angle subtended by an arc at the center is double the angle subtended at any point on the remaining part of the circle. Let's break this down. Imagine a circle, take 2 points on the circle, say, A and B, and draw an arc between them. Now, join A and B to the center of the circle. The angle formed at the center, angle AOB, is called the central angle. Now, pick any other point P on the remaining part of the circle, not between A and B, and draw lines from A and B to P. This angle, angle APB, is called the angle at the circumference. Here's the magic. The angle at the center, angle AOB, is always twice the angle at the circumference, angle APB. Thanks for watching. If you found value in this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This is JE Maths Unlocked, where concepts click, doubts disappear, and success is just a video away. Unlock your potential, one concept at a time. See you in the next video.